I returned home from the night shift at exactly 2:43 in the morning, the kind of cold Minnesota hour when the air outside slices your lungs and the world feels abandoned. My scrubs smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender lotion, a scent that usually comforted me after caring for residents at the nursing home. But that night, it did nothing to soften what waited behind the front door. I stepped inside, quietly hoping he had already passed out. The house was dark, except for the orange glow from the old lamp in the living room. I set my keys down without a sound, trying to move with the same caution I used when repositioning frail patients at 3 in the morning. I took 2 steps before I heard his voice. "Where's my cigarettes?" His words slurred together in that way that meant the whiskey bottle had been his only companion for hours. I turned toward him slowly and saw my father, Richard Cole, sitting on the edge of the worn recliner, elbows on his knees, jaw tight, eyes red. He was 58, but the drinking carved deep cracks into his face and made him look older, meaner, like the world owed him something and I was the one sent to deliver it. I answered softly and told him the store had been out. It was the truth. The shelves were empty, and I did not dare stop at a second place because the storm had started to thicken. He stood up fast, too fast, and knocked over the empty bottle at his feet. It rolled across the hardwood floor toward me. His voice rose. "You had one thing to do. One thing." The anger, built the way a storm front rolls across the plains, silent for a second before the crack of thunder. I stepped back, but he moved quicker than he looked capable of. His hand struck my cheek so hard the sound echoed off the walls. Then came another blow and another, each landing with a sick heaviness that made the room tilt. I did not scream. I did not beg. I did not give him the satisfaction of seeing fear. I stayed silent, absorbing the hits until my skin burned and my vision blurred. My ribs ached under the weight of his fists. My shoulder struck the corner of the hallway and pain shot down my arm. When he finally stepped away, panting like he had just finished some twisted workout, I slid down the wall to the floor. He stared at me for a moment as if waiting for me to lash out or cry or break. When I remained silent, he snorted like I disgusted him. Then he turned and stomped up the stairs, muttering curses under his breath. I did not move until I heard his bedroom door slam. I checked the time on the microwave clock, blinking from a power outage earlier in the day. 3:17 in the morning. I pressed my palm to my cheek and felt the heat swelling under my skin. My arms trembled from the shock and the throbbing aches that were beginning to pulse like small electric wires beneath my flesh. I sat there in the hallway, surrounded by the silence of a house that had never been a home, and forced my breathing to slow. The refrigerator hummed. The walls creaked. Outside, the wind dragged snow across the windows like sandpaper. I stared at the staircase he had just climbed, imagining him sprawled across his bed in the same drunken oblivion he always escaped to after hurting me. For years he had shouted louder than everyone, hit harder than anyone, and believed he could bend me into whatever shape he wanted. Tonight was different. My silence was no longer fear. It was calculation. I whispered so quietly I could barely hear myself. Tomorrow morning he will meet someone he cannot intimidate. The words did not tremble. My body was bruised and shaking, but my voice carried something new, something steady. I lifted myself off the floor inch by inch, gripping the wall as the throbbing in my ribs sharpened. I walked toward the bathroom, every step a reminder of how badly he had beaten me. When I flipped on the light, the mirror reflected a version of myself that hardly looked human. One eye was already swelling. My cheekbone carried a rising bruise the size of his hand. My lower lip had split. I looked at that reflection for a long time, letting the quiet wrap around me. Not the quiet of fear. The quiet before a plan. When I finally turned away from the mirror, the house felt different. Not less dangerous. Not safer. But the kind of different that comes just before something breaks open. I glanced once more at the clock glowing faintly in the kitchen. 3:17. The last painful hour before dawn. The last painful hour before everything changed. I closed the bathroom door behind me and locked it, not because I thought he would come down again, but because the small metal click gave me a sense of control I had not felt in years. The overhead light cast a harsh glare across the tiles and made every bruise on my face bloom darker. I leaned toward the mirror and traced the swelling around my left eye, watching the skin react beneath my fingertip. It hurt, but the hurt felt distant, as if my body had already begun separating pain from purpose. I turned my head slowly from side to side, studying the way the purple and blue tones were spreading like ink through water. The cut on my lower lip had dried, leaving a thin line that stung whenever I breathed. I could taste blood mixed with the peppermint gum I had chewed on my drive home. My jaw throbbed as if it were trying to pulse its way out of my skin. I washed my hands and opened the small medical kit I kept under the sink. It held supplies I usually used on elderly patients, not on myself, but I had learned long ago never to keep the house without them. I cleaned the cut on my lip carefully and held a cold compress against my cheek until the sharp sting softened into a dull ache. My ribs felt tight and every breath stretched the bruised muscles beneath them. I lifted the hem of my shirt and saw more marks spreading across my torso like storm clouds. I swallowed hard and forced myself not to look away. Documentation mattered. I grabbed my phone and took pictures from every angle, pausing between each shot when the pain forced me to steady my breath. I recorded a short video turning slowly in the cramped space, narrating the time and date and the reason for every mark I could see. I saved everything to a folder I named For Dawn. After that, I opened my messaging app and sent the photos and video to Nina. No explanation. I knew she would understand. The bathroom felt cold despite the heat vent humming above me. I wrapped my arms around my waist and closed my eyes for a moment. The house was silent except for the occasional groan of the old pipes and the muffled snore that filtered faintly from upstairs. The sound used to comfort me when I was a child. Now it reminded me of a predator resting before the next strike. I picked up my phone again and opened the Notes app. I typed each line slowly, making sure my thoughts were exact. 5 o'clock call Nina. 5:20 call non-emergency line. Make breakfast like nothing happened. Do not interact with him. Keep voice calm. Record anything suspicious. I stared at the list, then added the final line. Silence is my shield tonight. I read it twice, letting the meaning settle. I had learned over time that raising my voice or defending myself only fed his rage. Silence, however, confused him. It made him underestimate me. It made him careless. I placed the phone on the sink and washed my face gently with warm water. I winced at every touch. When I patted my skin dry, I looked back into the mirror. My reflection stared at me with an expression I had not worn in years. Determination. Not anger or fear, but a quiet resolve that lived deeper than either. I stepped out of the bathroom and moved carefully down the hallway. My socked feet barely made a sound against the hardwood floor. Every room felt like it was holding its breath with me. The shadows on the walls seemed sharper than usual, as if the house itself was watching what I would do next. In the kitchen, I opened the cabinet where I kept my emergency nursing supplies. I took out a small suture kit. My lip was split enough that if I did nothing, it might reopen in the morning and bleed again. I had stitched worse. With steady hands, I numbed the area with a cold compress, cleaned it again, and threaded the needle. The first puncture brought a sting so sharp it made my vision flicker, but I did not stop. 3 small stitches closed the wound. They were not perfect, but they were enough to hold. I exhaled slowly and leaned back in the chair. The digital clock on the stove showed 3:40. The minutes were slipping away quickly, each one pulling me closer to dawn. I wrapped myself in a worn sweatshirt and walked through the house, checking locks and windows the way I always did after one of his outbursts. The routine grounded me. Lock the back door. Check the sliding glass latch. Make sure the kitchen window is shut. Confirm the front door deadbolt. The familiarity of the pattern steadied my heartbeat. Once everything was secure, I moved to the living room and sat on the couch. My body protested every movement. My ribs pulsed under each breath. My cheek throbbed in rhythm with my heartbeat. Yet a strange calm washed over me. I had never allowed myself to imagine a way out before, but that morning glimmered like a thin ribbon of light under a door. I closed my eyes and listened. The refrigerator hummed. The water heater clicked. The wind pushed against the siding in long, steady breaths. Upstairs, my father snored a deep, uneven rumble that echoed through the vents. The sound still frightened me, but it no longer froze me. It simply reminded me why the plan had to work. I opened my eyes and checked the time again. 3:55. I pushed myself up from the couch and walked back to the bathroom to assess the swelling. It had grown slightly, but the cold compress slowed it. I refreshed the ice and pressed it to my face while mentally rehearsing the next steps. Call Nina first. She would come no questions asked. Then call the sheriff's office. Most importantly, avoid confrontation at all costs. I touched the edge of the bruise again and whispered not in fear, but in promise. This ends today. The house felt less like a cage and more like a battlefield I had already begun to leave behind. The silence was still heavy, but it was no longer suffocating. It was strategic. It was mine. At 4:10, I turned off the bathroom light and stood in the hallway, letting the darkness settle around me. My father's snores rolled through the ceiling in slow waves. I held the cold compress to my cheek and walked toward the kitchen, ready to face the long wait until dawn. By the time the clock crept past 4:30, the pain in my ribs had become a steady drumbeat, but the fog of exhaustion sharpened into something clearer than adrenaline. It felt like standing inside the eye of a storm, battered but oddly calm. I moved into the kitchen and turned on the smallest light above the stove, bathing the counters in a low, amber glow. The house was too quiet, but dawn was coming, and dawn had always been kinder to me than the night. I opened the pantry slowly, careful not to let the door creak. Inside sat the same items I bought every week: oatmeal, wheat bread, ground coffee, cinnamon, the little jar of honey my father pretended he did not like but always used. I gathered them on the counter with deliberate motions. None of this was about serving him. It was about creating the illusion of normalcy, a picture he expected to see, so he would not sniff out what waited behind it. The sheriff's deputies needed him unaware. I needed him predictable. I filled a pot with water and set it on the stove. As the burner lit with a soft click, the faint blue flame made the metal shimmer. I stirred oats into the water and watched them swell, slowly releasing the warm, earthy scent that always reminded me of childhood breakfasts before everything turned sour between us. I toasted 2 slices of wheat bread and spread a thin layer of honey across each one. The honey pooled into the grooves of the toast, glistening in the soft light. Every movement hurt, but precision mattered more than comfort. I brewed coffee next. The aroma filled the kitchen, rich and dark, drifting through the air like a veil. The smell would travel up the staircase and reach him soon, and that was the point. Let him wake thinking the world had snapped back into its usual pattern. Let him walk into the kitchen believing he still owned every inch of this house and every decision made inside it. Because the moment he saw who else was there, the walls he relied on would crumble. While the coffee dripped, I glanced at my phone. A message glowed on the lock screen. Nina. I unlocked it with shaking fingers. I am awake. I will be there at dawn, bringing 2 deputies. My breath hitched not from fear, but from something like relief. Nina understood the stakes without me needing to explain. I typed back a single word. Hurry. The clock read 4:53. I plated the oatmeal carefully so the bowl appeared untouched and ordinary. I arranged the toast, poured a small amount of honey into a separate dish, and set out a fork. It felt surreal to prepare breakfast for the same man whose fists had bruised my skin only hours earlier. Yet there was nothing submissive in the way I moved. It was all strategy, the same kind I used in emergencies at the nursing home. Stabilize the situation, control the environment, protect the vulnerable. In this case, the vulnerable was me. The kitchen smelled warm and familiar, a stark contrast to the cold ache tightening around my ribs. I wiped the counter, placed the sponge aside, and checked the table. Everything had to look effortless like any other morning because if he sensed tension or hesitation, he might react unpredictably. I could not risk that. As I adjusted the sugar jar, a wave of dizziness swept over me. I steadied myself on the edge of the counter until the room stopped spinning. I whispered to myself, "Just hold on, Savannah. You only need to get to sunrise." The lights from a distant snowplow flickered across the window and vanished. Outside, thin sheets of snow drifted down in slow spirals. Winter in Minnesota always arrived like an uninvited guest, cold and relentless. But that morning, the cold felt like a cleansing breath before something new. At 5 exactly, I took a deep breath and picked up my phone. I stepped into the hallway to keep my voice low and called Nina. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was sharper now, fully awake. "Are you alone?" I nodded, even though she could not see me. The photos were enough for her to understand. She said she was on her way and told me to stay calm. After hanging up, I dialed the non-emergency line for the county sheriff. The dispatcher spoke with steady professionalism. "Two deputies have been assigned. Estimated arrival between 6 and 6:15. Do not approach the suspect. Do you have a safe room?" My safe room was the small laundry room where the door locked from the inside. I told her yes. She instructed me to stay within view of exits and to keep communication open. When I ended the call, the house felt different again, not less dangerous, but on the edge of something inevitable. 5:28. I returned to the kitchen and checked the oatmeal. It had thickened perfectly. I poured coffee into the mug with the chipped rim that my father refused to throw away. I held it in both hands, breathing in the steam to steady myself. Outside, a faint line of pink brushed the horizon. Dawn was finally approaching. Each minute felt like a lifetime. I busied myself rearranging the table to keep my mind grounded. I wiped a small smudge from the edge of the plate. I straightened the salt shaker. I folded a napkin and set it neatly beside the toast. My hands trembled slightly, but the routine movements disguised it. As the first real light seeped through the windows, I caught my reflection in the dark glass. One eye swollen, cheek bruised, a faint line of stitches on my lip. I looked like someone who had survived a storm and was waiting for the next one with clear intent. I placed the mug on the table and stepped back. Everything was ready. The trap was not a dramatic setup or a theatrical scene. It was quiet, ordinary, the most dangerous kind of ordinary. Dawn crept over the snow-covered street, painting the kitchen in pale gold. I wrapped my arms around myself and whispered the same words I had said hours earlier. Silence is my shield, but the morning will be my voice. The first hint of morning crept into the kitchen like a cautious visitor, soft and pale, brushing the countertops with a cold blue glow. My bruises throbbed in the shifting light, reminding me of every strike, every breath I had forced myself to take in silence. I tightened my arms around my ribs as if holding myself together. The digital clock flicked to 5 o'clock, exactly its numbers glowing in the dimness. I picked up my phone. Calling Nina was supposed to feel simple. It did not. My thumb hovered for a moment before I pressed her name. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was sharper than earlier, threaded with worry and something fiercer. "Savannah, talk to me." I swallowed. "He is still asleep." The words came out raspier than I expected. I heard her inhale slow and steady, like she was grounding herself before stepping into a dangerous scene. "Stay where you are. Deputies Harris and Lee are already up. We will leave in 2 minutes. Do not confront him." I nodded silently, knowing she could not see, but feeling the weight of her instruction like a hand on my shoulder. After we ended the call, I looked around the kitchen again. The oatmeal sat cooling on the table. The coffee steamed gently. The toast glistened under the soft light. Everything looked like a normal morning, the kind of morning I used to imagine having when I was little before life twisted into something else entirely. At 5:20, my alarm vibrated. This was the moment to call the sheriff's office. I dialed the non-emergency line and forced my voice to stay even. I gave the dispatcher my name, address, and details. Domestic assault injuries, documented suspect intoxicated, but currently sleeping upstairs. 2 deputies were already assigned, according to my friend, Deputy Ramirez. The dispatcher confirmed the call. "Deputies Harris and Lee are en route to your location. Estimated arrival 12 minutes. Please do not attempt to engage the suspect. Stay in a room with a lock if possible. Keep your phone on you." I thanked her and hung up. The house settled again into a heavy stillness. I stood in the hallway for a long moment listening. My father's snores drifted through the vent above me, low and uneven, the rhythm of a man oblivious to everything he had caused. The sound no longer froze me. It steeled me. I walked back into the kitchen and braced myself against the counter as a wave of pain rippled across my ribs. The bruises deepened under the morning light, darkening into swollen shapes that mapped the story of the night in brutal detail. I reached for a cold rag and pressed it against my cheek. The contact stung sharply but grounded me. 5:28. I checked the locks again. Back door, secure. Side window, secure. Front door, deadbolt engaged. Each small click was another step away from being powerless. Outside, the street was coated in fresh snow, unbroken except for faint tire tracks left by the snowplow earlier. Porch lights glowed across the cul-de-sac like quiet beacons. Mrs. Harriet's light was on, which meant she was awake, probably stirring her first cup of tea. She had always noticed everything that happened on this street. A watcher by nature, a witness by accident. 5:37. A faint engine noise drifted through the stillness. My body tensed before my mind processed the sound. I glanced through the blinds and saw twin headlights approaching from the far end of the street. The vehicle moved slowly, deliberately, the way law enforcement always approached homes before sunrise. I let out a shaky breath. They were early. That was good. I stepped back from the window and wiped the counters again, not because they needed cleaning, but because my hands needed something to do. The house felt smaller suddenly, as if the walls were leaning in to listen. My breath fogged in the cold air drifting from the drafty kitchen window. The hum of the refrigerator seemed louder than usual, blending with the faint rumbling from the heater. I checked the table one last time, making sure everything remained undisturbed because even the smallest detail mattered. My father needed to wake to a scene that would disarm him. Not panic, not chaos. Routine. A routine he believed he controlled. The contrast would make his shock sharper when the truth walked in behind me. 5:49. Another engine softer this time, likely Nina's aging SUV. My chest tightened with something close to relief. She had shown up for me while off-duty more times than I could count, but never for something like this. I paced to the hallway mirror. My reflection startled me again. The swollen cheek, the stitched lip, the faint blue shadows under my eyes. A night's worth of violence etched into my skin. But beneath it, I saw something steadier than fear. Not strength, not yet, but resolve. The kind of resolve that grows only in people who have survived too many nights like the one I had lived through. At 5:53, a soft three-note knock echoed through the front door. The pattern was familiar. Nina's signal. I inhaled sharply, tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, ignored the sting it caused, and walked toward the door. The house seemed to hold its breath. The quiet felt different now, as if the air itself anticipated the moment that would change everything. Dawn had arrived, and with it, the beginning of the end. The three-note knock repeated softly, the kind of knock designed not to wake a violent man sleeping upstairs. I exhaled once, steadying myself, then unlocked the deadbolt. The cold morning air slipped in as I opened the door just wide enough for them to step through. Nina entered first. Her dark hair was pulled back, her badge clipped discreetly to her belt, even though she was off duty. Her eyes scanned me in one swift sweep, widening for a fraction of a second when she saw the bruising across my cheek and the stitches on my lip. She did not comment, at least not yet. Behind her stepped Deputies Harris and Lee, both in uniform, both alert. They moved with quiet authority as they entered, automatically positioning themselves where they could observe the entryways without exposing their backs. They did not sit. They did not drink coffee. They did not relax for a moment. Everything about their posture signaled professionalism and readiness. The door closed softly behind them, muffling the cold. Nina lowered her voice. "Savannah, is he upstairs?" I nodded, still asleep. She glanced toward the staircase, then returned her attention to me. Her voice softened in a way only someone who cares can manage. "You did the right thing calling." Deputy Harris, taller with a calm, steady presence, stepped closer but stopped at a respectful distance. "Ma'am, do you need medical attention right now?" I shook my head slowly. "Not urgent. Urgent care later. I have pictures and video." He nodded once. "May we see the injuries for documentation?" His tone was formal but gentle. I lifted my chin slightly so they could see the bruising. He took out a small department camera and photographed my face under the kitchen light. He angled it slightly, then again, ensuring every detail was captured. Deputy Lee walked into the living room and quietly documented the surroundings. No food overturned, no signs of struggle there. Everything exactly as I had left it after the attack. Nina noticed the bowl of oatmeal on the table and the coffee steaming beside it. Her brows lifted. "You made breakfast." I kept my voice even. "He expects breakfast. Routine will keep him calm when he wakes." Harris nodded again, quietly impressed. "Smart." Very smart. I handed Nina my phone. The pictures, the video, the timestamps. She scrolled slowly, jaw tightening with every swipe. Her voice was a low whisper. He did all of this last night. I answered just as quietly. Around 3:17. Something flickered across her face, something like restrained fury. She looked at the deputies. You have everything you need. They both nodded. Deputy Lee opened a small notebook. Ma'am, I need a brief verbal statement for our initial report. Just the basics for now. I kept my eyes on the counter as I spoke. He was drunk when I got home from my shift. He got angry because the store was out of his cigarettes. He hit me multiple times. Face, ribs, shoulder, lip split. I did not fight back. I waited until he slept. I documented everything. Lee's pen moved rapidly across the page. Did he use any weapons? No. Any threats? Not last night. But there have been before. I have some saved. He nodded. We will need those. Behind us, the floor above creaked slightly. All three looked toward the ceiling at once. Nina mouthed one word. Careful. The room fell into a hush so deep it felt like the air itself froze. The house moments earlier, still and almost peaceful, now felt tense, as if waiting for a match to hit gasoline. Harris lowered his voice until it barely registered above a whisper. When he comes downstairs, stand behind us. Do not speak to him unless we ask you to. I nodded again, clutching the edge of the counter as another sharp ache pulsed through my ribs. The oatmeal's sweet scent drifted faintly through the air. The coffee's warmth curled upward like a fragile offering. A sound echoed from the stairwell. A groan, a shift of weight, a slow dragging of feet across carpet. Nina moved subtly to my side. Harris and Lee stepped forward, positioning themselves in a triangular formation facing the entry to the kitchen. None of them reached for their weapons. They simply prepared. My heartbeat climbed into my throat. Footsteps thudded on the stairs. Heavy, unsteady. The sound of a man expecting a quiet morning, expecting obedience, expecting routine. He appeared at the top of the staircase, rubbing his face, squinting against the kitchen light. His voice was thick with sleep. Smells like coffee. Good. Breakfast better be ready this time. He descended 2 more steps before his gaze drifted past the table and landed on the 3 uniformed deputies standing beneath the glow of the morning light. His body went rigid. His foot froze mid-step. His expression collapsed into something between confusion and dawning fear. His voice cracked. What is this? Harris spoke first calm, but immovable. Mr. Cole, we need to speak with you regarding an incident reported early this morning. My father blinked rapidly, as if trying to force the scene into a different shape. His eyes darted from Harris to Lee to Nina, then to me. I remained behind them, silent, breath tight, standing exactly where they positioned me. His face drained of color. Completely. Totally. As though he saw for the first time the consequences he never imagined would come. The morning guests had arrived, and they were not here for breakfast. My father stood frozen halfway down the stairs, gripping the banister like the house had suddenly tilted beneath him. The morning light poured through the front window and revealed every flicker of panic across his face. His gaze darted between the deputies and Nina, then landed on me with a mixture of disbelief and wounded pride, the kind a man shows only when he realizes he no longer controls the room. He swallowed his throat, bobbing once. Savannah, what is this? Why are they in my house? His voice carried a thin edge of anger, but it was diluted with confusion. He expected me to be alone, bruised, silent, making breakfast like always. He had not prepared for witnesses. Harris stepped forward slightly, keeping his hands visible and calm the way deputies do when they expect escalation, but hope to avoid it. Mr. Cole, we need to ask you a few questions. There was an incident reported early this morning involving alleged domestic assault. My father blinked as if he had misheard, his eyebrows pulled together. Domestic assault? Who said that? No one answered. Not yet. His eyes moved back to me. There was a tremor in his voice now. Savannah, what did you do? For the first time, he sounded like the one unsure of what came next. I felt Nina's presence beside me, steady as a barrier. I did exactly what they told me to do. I stayed behind them silent hands at my sides, breath shallow but controlled. The night before silence had been survival. Now it became evidence. Deputy Lee stepped to the side, creating a subtle semicircle with Harris that boxed my father into the bottom half of the staircase. They had not touched him, but the positioning was unmistakable. A soft perimeter. A message. You will not move without going through us. My father took one more step down slower this time, testing the space like an animal weighing whether a trap had already sprung. His voice dropped an octave. This is a misunderstanding. My daughter is dramatic. She bruises easily. She exaggerates things. Lee's tone remained steady and neutral. We will speak with her separately. Right now, we need your version of events from last night. His gaze snapped to me again. You told them I hit you. His words cracked like a whip. I flinched, a small, involuntary reaction, but Nina stepped half an inch closer, blocking his line of sight without saying a word. Harris lifted a hand, subtly signaling her to stay steady. Mr. Cole, we need you to stay where you are. My father bristled. What for? I did nothing wrong. Let me talk to my daughter. Harris's voice hardened by a degree. No. Sir, you will speak with us first. A muscle ticked in my father's jaw. He was not used to limits. He was not used to anyone telling him no. He tried again, louder this time. Savannah, come here. Tell them the truth. The truth. The word rang bitter in my mind. All the nights he told me I provoked him. All the mornings he pretended nothing happened. All the years he insisted no one would believe me. I did not move, did not speak, did not lift my eyes from the small crack near the baseboard where the paint had begun to chip. My silence answered for me. Something inside him shifted then. His posture stiffened, his shoulders squared, his voice sharpened into accusation. You think you can ruin my life over a little argument. You think you can bring the law in here like you own this place. Nina stepped forward a single pace, not aggressive but immovable. Richard stopped talking. She used his first name the way officers do when they need someone to pay attention. He stared at her in disbelief. Nina Ramirez. I knew your mother. She would be ashamed of this. Nina did not react, not visibly, but her jaw tightened, the air thickened. Lee spoke, then his tone firm. Sir, please remain at the base of the stairs. We need you to answer a few questions calmly. My father hesitated. His weight shifted backward 1 foot, touching the step behind him. A subtle retreat. His instinct was to flee, but fleeing would incriminate him. Cornered animals do unpredictable things. Harris sensed it. He moved half a step closer, not threatening but ready. Mr. Cole, did you strike your daughter last night? The question cut through the air like a blade. My father opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. She is lying. She came home late, mouthing off starting trouble. Harris did not respond verbally. He simply looked at my father the way only a law enforcement officer can when they already know the answer. My father's gaze jerked to me again, searching for a cue, a weakness, something he could grab onto. But I stayed still, silent, a statue carved from bruises and resolve. I said nothing last night because speaking would have made him hit harder. I said nothing this morning because speaking would have weakened the impact of the truth, already circling him like tightening rope. Lee finished writing something on his notepad. Thank you, sir. Now we need to speak with her privately. My father's face hardened. He stepped forward. Over my dead body. Harris intercepted him instantly, not touching him, not escalating, just placing himself directly in my father's path with the kind of presence that makes clear the conversation is over. Sir, remain where you are. My father inhaled sharply, chest rising. For a moment, I saw the same rage he used on me ignite in his eyes, but this time he had nowhere to aim it. Not with 3 trained officers watching every breath, not with evidence already documented, not with his victim standing behind the shield of their uniforms. I lowered my voice just enough for him to hear. I said nothing last night. I am speaking now. His face drained. The deputies positioned themselves with quiet precision. The morning had shifted. Control had shifted. And for the first time in my life, he understood it. The kitchen felt unnaturally bright as the sun finally crested over the snowbanks outside. The soft morning light spilled across the floorboards, illuminating the bruises on my face and the growing tension in my father's stance. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator and the slow, shaky breaths I tried to keep quiet. Then, Deputy Harris broke the silence. "Sir, we have enough information to proceed. We need you to stand still while we conduct this next step." My father's eyes widened, the whites showing for a split second before he masked it with badly feigned indignation. "This is ridiculous! You cannot arrest me based on lies and a few bruises." "She bruises if you look at her the wrong way." He pointed at me like I was a stain on the carpet. "Ask her. She will tell you she is overreacting. She always does." I stayed silent. Every instinct inside me urged me to speak, to defend myself, to shout the truth until the walls shook. But I remembered Nina's instructions. Let them handle this. Let the law speak for you. Harris stepped closer, not touching my father, but leaving almost no space between them. "Mr. Cole, we have documented visible injuries. We have her recorded statement. We have time-stamped photographs. We have medical evidence on the way." My father's posture shifted, his shoulders tensing. He exhaled a shaky breath that fogged in the cold air drifting through the hallway. "That does not mean anything." I barely touched her. "She falls into things. She is dramatic. I take care of her." He said it like a man so used to rewriting reality that he believed his own edits. Nina stepped forward, then voice steady and low, the voice of someone who knew him long enough to understand exactly what he was capable of. "Richard, do not make this harder. Cooperate, for once in your life." His eyes snapped to hers, and the rage flared again. You think you can come into my home and take my daughter away from me. You have no idea what she puts me through. Savannah is stubborn, mouthy, ungrateful. She is lucky I have not put her out on the street." Nina's expression did not change, but something in her went still. Deputy Lee glanced at Harris and gave the slightest nod. It was the signal. Harris straightened his shoulders. "Mr. Cole, turn around and place your hands behind your back. You are under arrest for domestic assault causing bodily harm." My father froze. Then his voice erupted loud enough to rattle the window panes. "No, you are not arresting me. Get out of my house. Now." He lunged forward just a half step, but Harris and Lee reacted instantly. Not violently, not aggressively, simply with the practiced precision of officers trained to control an unpredictable subject. One moved to his right, one to his left. They did not grab him. They boxed him in, guiding his movement like invisible walls. He tried to twist away, but Harris angled his body, cutting off the escape path. He tried to step backward, but Lee was already there. My father let out a guttural noise somewhere between rage and panic. "You cannot do this. You cannot take me in. I am a good father. Ask anyone. Ask her. Savannah. Tell them I did not hit you." He looked at me with the same frantic desperation he had used all my life to pull me back into his control. "Tell them, Savannah. Now." My throat tightened. The bruises on my ribs burned. The memory of his fists throbbed under my skin. My voice came out barely above a whisper, but clear enough to cut through his delusion. "I did tell them." A raw noise left his throat. Not a cry. A realization. A fracture. Harris repeated louder this time, hands still visible and empty. "Mr. Cole, turn around and place your hands behind your back." "Now." My father's shoulders sagged slightly. Not surrender. Shock. He had never imagined this moment was possible. In his world, he controlled everything. He defined truth, rewrote history, shaped every narrative to cast himself as the victim. But now, Truth stood on the staircase with 2 deputies and an officer off duty who knew him better than he wanted anyone to. He growled under his breath, but finally turned. Harris secured the cuffs with measured care, not rough, not lenient. Standard procedure. My father winced, not from pain, but from humiliation. Lee read his rights. His hands trembled slightly as the words washed over him. "You have the right to remain silent." For once in his life, he did. When they began escorting him toward the door, he twisted his head to look at me one last time. His voice cracked. "You are going to regret this. You hear me. You will regret this." Nina stepped partially in his line of sight. "Do not speak to her." He hissed something under his breath as they guided him outside. The cold air slammed into the hallway when Harris opened the door. Snowflakes blew in, sticking to my father's shirt as they led him toward the cruiser parked at the curb, lights silent but ready. Across the street, Mrs. Harriet stood on her porch, wrapped in a heavy robe, watching the scene unfold with the solemn stillness of someone who has seen this pattern far too many times. She did not speak. She simply nodded once at me, a gesture heavy with meaning. I nodded back. When the door closed and the house fell quiet, I felt my knees give slightly. Nina caught my arm before I could stumble. "You are safe," she whispered. "For now, you are safe." The warmth of her voice nearly broke me, not from fear, from the unfamiliar sensation of someone standing on my side. They drove him away minutes later, snow swirling behind the patrol car like white smoke. The red taillights vanished into the morning haze. And just like that, for the first time in my life, the house did not feel like his. It felt empty, and empty was safer. Nina guided me to the couch as Deputy Lee finished the report. Harris handed me a card with a case number. They explained each step of what would follow. Bail, court, protective orders. They spoke calmly, professionally, but with the heaviness of people who knew the road ahead would not be easy. When they finally left, Nina remained. She drove me to a women's shelter across town. It was warm inside with soft blankets and a quiet room waiting for me. And for the first time in years, I slept, knowing he could not open my door. Justice had not finished, but it had begun. The women's shelter smelled faintly of laundry detergent and chamomile, a mixture that wrapped itself around me like a blanket even after I lay down on the narrow cot. My ribs ached when I breathed, my cheek throbbed in steady pulses, and my stitches tugged every time I shifted. But the room was warm, the door locked from the inside. No footsteps stomped down a hallway toward me. No slurred shouting vibrated through the walls. Silence, for the first time, felt like safety. I slept hard and dreamless for almost 6 hours. When I woke, the sun was high, and the world outside the frosted window was white with fresh snow. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from an unknown number. 2 voicemails. A text from Nina. "Stay where you are. Deputies are checking something. Call me when you wake." My stomach tightened. I pressed play on the first voicemail. My father's voice erupted into the room loud enough to make me flinch. "Savannah, you better pick up this phone right now. I do not know what lies you told those idiots, but you need to fix this. You hear me? Fix it." The message ended with the heavy thump of something hitting a wall. The second voicemail came in with a different tone, quieter but far more dangerous. "Are you proud of yourself? Getting your own father arrested. I hope you understand what you have started. People will talk. People will know. You will regret this." He ended with a shaky breath that reminded me of the way he sounded just before hitting me, that cold, whispering edge of rage. I forwarded both messages to Nina without listening again. Then I called her. She answered immediately. "You okay?" I nodded even though she could not see me. He left voicemails. Threatening. She exhaled sharply. "Then we document them. Sheriff is already adding them to the report." I asked if he was still in custody. He was released on bail an hour ago. My breath caught. Nina continued. "It is normal. Domestic cases almost always allow bail unless there is a severe injury or a weapon." I closed my eyes. That familiar dread coiled in my stomach. He is angry. He is more than angry. "I know. That is why we are increasing patrols around your house." And Savannah listened carefully. "Do not go home. Not yet. Stay at the shelter. They have security. You are safer there." I agreed. I hung up and wrapped the blanket tighter around myself. The safety of the shelter felt then suddenly like a temporary shield against a storm that had already begun to rebuild strength. Around noon, a soft knock came at my door. One of the shelter advocates, a woman named Brenda with kind eyes and silver hair, stepped inside. "You have a visitor." "Not him, don't worry." She smiled softly and stepped aside. In walked a familiar face. My neighbor, Mrs. Harriet. Her wool coat was still dusted with snow, and she held a small USB drive in one hand. I did not expect to see her. She shut the door gently and walked closer. Savannah, I have something you need to see. She handed me the USB. My husband installed cameras everywhere before he died. Paranoid old goat, bless him. I never turned them off. One of them caught last night's assault through your kitchen window. My throat tightened. My legs felt weak. Harriet continued. I know it is not easy to watch, but this kind of evidence changes cases. It helps judges see the truth faster. I nodded slowly. Thank you. She squeezed my hand before leaving. After she was gone, I stared at the USB, feeling both dread and gratitude swirl together. Later that afternoon, I went to urgent care. The doctor, a young woman with a soft voice, confirmed what I feared. 2 bruised ribs, possible hairline fracture swelling across my cheekbone, and a minor concussion. She documented everything, printed the report, and signed it. I added that paperwork to a growing pile of evidence. When I returned to the shelter, a deputy waited inside the lobby. He introduced himself as Deputy Lowell. You filed a report this morning, correct? I nodded. He held up a small notebook. We arrested a man banging on the door of your father's house earlier. He said he was looking for you. Said your father told him you were staying there. My stomach turned. My father had sent someone. Lowell continued. The man was intoxicated and aggressive. He was charged with disorderly conduct. He told us your father asked him to get you to come home. The deputy's eyes softened slightly. Do not worry. We are documenting everything. Every incident builds the case. After he left, I sat on the edge of the bed and hugged my knees to my chest, ignoring the protest from my bruised ribs. My father had never used someone else to intimidate me before. It meant he was getting desperate. That night, the shelter staff invited me to a support group session in the common room. I hesitated at the door when I saw the circle of women sitting under soft yellow lights. Some older, some younger, some with fading bruises, some with old wounds you could not see. When the facilitator, a woman named Dawn, gestured for me to join, I stepped inside. I listened as they spoke. Stories of fear, of leaving, of not leaving soon enough, of rebuilding, of surviving. When it was my turn, my voice shook, not from weakness, from the weight of finally telling the truth out loud. I went home from work last night. He was drunk. He beat me. And I did not say a word. Not until the morning deputies arrived. The room stayed quiet. Then several women nodded at once, slow and knowing. One whispered, "Silence is often the loudest scream." My eyes stung. When the meeting ended, Dawn placed a pamphlet in my hand. A list of trauma therapists, a list of steps for filing a full restraining order, a list of emergency contacts, a path forward. Back in my room, I checked my phone again. One more text from a number I did not recognize. You are going to wish you kept your mouth shut. I forwarded it to Nina and blocked the number. The snow outside thickened into a silver curtain. The wind picked up howling against the shelter windows. But inside, wrapped in a donated blanket with my evidence folder growing heavier by the hour, I felt something unfamiliar. Strength. Not the loud kind, the steady kind, the kind that builds quietly in the aftermath of fear. My father was escalating, but so was the truth. The courthouse smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper, the same scent that clung to every government building in Minnesota. The morning was bitterly cold, sharp enough that my breath turned white as I walked up the stone steps. Nina stayed by my side the entire way, her hand hovering near my elbow in case my ribs protested the climb. Inside, the hallway echoed with footsteps and murmured conversations. People shuffled to hearings about custody parking violations, restraining orders, small claims. Ordinary battles. Mine did not feel ordinary. Mine felt like stepping into a room built out of every fear I had carried since childhood and finally turning on the light. The clerk directed us to a small courtroom on the second floor. Nina held the folder of evidence thick now with photos, videos, medical reports, printed threats, and Harriet's camera footage. I held my breath. When we entered, my father was already there. He sat on the left side of the room beside a public defender who looked exhausted before the hearing even began. My father wore a clean shirt, hair combed back, the picture of a man who wanted to appear composed. but his eyes betrayed him. Red, inflamed, and when he saw me walk in bruises still visible, his posture stiffened into something defensive and brittle. He looked away first. That small act was more powerful than any apology he could have faked. Nina guided me to the right side of the room. The judge had not entered yet. A court officer walked past us, glancing at my face with practiced empathy. "You are safe on this side," she whispered. "He will not come near you." Her voice steadied me more than she knew. A minute later, the bailiff called out, "All rise." Judge Karen Whitmore entered her presence sharp and focused. She was in her early 60s, hair silver glasses perched low on her nose. She took her seat and scanned the room with an expression that brokered neither sympathy nor tolerance for nonsense. She addressed the court. "We are here to review a petition for a temporary restraining order, allegations of domestic assault, and related evidence." The public defender stood. "Your Honor, we would like to note that Mr. Cole maintains the allegations are exaggerated and that the injuries are not consistent with assault." Judge Whitmore lifted one eyebrow, already unimpressed. She turned to me. "Ms. Cole, you may proceed with your statement." My throat tightened, but I rose. Standing sent a shockwave of pain through my ribs, but I did not let my body fold. I told her everything. Not wildly, not dramatically, calmly. The kind of calm that comes when you have repeated the events so many times in your head that the truth becomes a steady anchor. I described coming home from my shift, his anger, the blows, the lip split, the bruises, the silence, the dawn plan, the deputies, the arrest. I remained steady through most of it, but when I reached the part where he shouted, "I would regret this," my voice faltered. The judge did not rush me. She let the silence settle before nodding for me to continue. Nina handed her the folder. The judge opened it and took her time flipping through the contents. Photos of my bruised cheek, the stitches, the swelling along my ribs, Harriet's USB footage. She leaned forward and pressed a button on the small monitor as the hallway camera angle came into view. There was my father, arm raised, body tense. There I was flinching, absorbing the hit in silence. My stomach turned. I looked away. The judge did not. After a long moment, she pressed stop. She looked toward my father. "Mr. Cole, do you have anything to say about this footage?" My father cleared his throat. His voice came out strained, catching between disbelief and performance. "She pushed me. She threw something at me. She fell. She exaggerates. She always has. She wants attention." His lawyer nodded urgently beside him as though hoping the repetition might make the lie more believable. The judge raised her hand, silencing them. "Enough!" Her voice was a gavel itself. She turned to Nina. "Officer Ramirez, you were present when the report was taken." Nina stepped forward. "Yes, Your Honor." Injuries matched the statement. Suspect was intoxicated, threatening behavior documented. Deputies followed protocol. The judge nodded, satisfied. She looked back at me. "Ms. Cole, I have reviewed medical documents, timestamps, photographs, and witness evidence. Everything aligns. Everything is consistent. Everything supports your account." For the first time since entering the courthouse, I let myself breathe normally. She shifted her attention to my father. "The evidence is compelling. Your explanation is neither credible nor supported by anything presented here. Therefore, the court grants a full, no-contact restraining order effective immediately. 500 feet minimum distance. No calls, texts, emails, or third-party communication. Firearms to be surrendered within 24 hours. Mandatory enrollment in a state-certified anger management program." My father shot to his feet. "This is ridiculous! She is ruining my life! She is unstable! This is all a lie!" The bailiff took a single step forward, and my father shut his mouth, though rage still carved harsh lines into his face. The judge was unmoved. "One more outburst, and I will hold you in contempt. Sit down." He sat, fists trembling. She continued. "Mr. Cole, based on what I have witnessed today, if any further retaliation occurs, charges will escalate. Do you understand?" He stared straight ahead, jaw locked, and muttered something unintelligible. The judge was not satisfied. "Answer clearly." He forced out a resentful yes. She sat back in her chair. "Good. Court is adjourned." The gavel struck once sharp and clean. The bailiff called all rise again, but my legs trembled as I stood. Nina steadied my arm. My father glared at me across the room, a look filled with the kind of hatred people reserve for truths they cannot refute. But he could not reach me. He could not follow me. He could not speak to me. And for the first time in my life, the law stood between us, a line drawn in permanent ink. As we stepped out into the hallway, Harriet appeared at the far end, leaning on her cane, bundled in a thick coat. She gave me a soft smile. "You did well, dear. Very well." She touched my arm gently before continuing down the hall. Outside, the sky was bright blue, crisp against the cold. Each breath hurt my ribs, but the pain felt lighter, cleaner. My father's retaliation had begun in voicemails and messages. It had escalated through threats and proxies, but now the truth had spoken under the courtroom lights, and for the first time, truth had weight. Justice was not finished, but it was gaining momentum. The restraining order changed the air around me not because it erased danger, but because it named it out loud. For the first time, the law had acknowledged what I had endured for years. Yet danger does not disappear when spoken. It adapts, it waits, it tests fences. And within days, my father proved exactly that. I stayed at the shelter longer than planned. Nina insisted, and my ribs still ached with every breath. The staff placed me in a quieter room at the end of the hallway with thicker blankets and a small window that overlooked the parking lot. Snow drifted across the lot in slow spirals piling against the curb. At first, the quiet calmed me. Then, the quiet made room for fear to whisper again. On the third night, my phone buzzed, a number I did not recognize. The message was short. "You think this is over. You are wrong." I took a screenshot and sent it to Nina immediately. Her reply came within seconds. "Block the number. I am forwarding this to the sheriff. He is likely using a burner app. We will add it to the report." I blocked it. An hour later, another number texted, "You cannot hide behind cops forever." I forwarded. Blocked. Another came. Then another. All forwarded, all blocked. Each one added another stone to the growing wall of evidence. But the steady rhythm of threats chipped away at my nerves. The next morning, the shelter director pulled me aside. A man was seen driving slowly past the parking lot last night. He matched the general description of your father. We alerted the sheriff. My legs trembled beneath me. I felt anger. I felt fear. I felt exhaustion. But most of all, I felt ready. Ready to stop being hunted. Ready for this to end. That afternoon, Nina arrived at the shelter with a small box. She handed it to me. "A ring camera. I brought tools. I already talked to your landlord at the temporary apartment you will be moving into tomorrow. He is letting us install it." I blinked. "I did not know you were doing that." She gave me a small shrug. "You need eyes on every door, and on every shadow." The next day, she drove me to the apartment, a small one-bedroom above a bakery, the kind where warm bread smells seeped through the vents in the morning. Rent was cheap. The walls were thin, but the locks were sturdy. Nina and another officer installed the camera above the door. It clicked on with a soft chime. For a moment, I felt protected. For a moment, I breathed easier. Until the first night. I woke at 2:14 in the morning to the shrill tone of a notification. Motion detected. My heart lurched. I reached for my phone. The video loaded. Snow falling, the street empty. Then a shadow stepped into frame. A man. Hood up, shoulders hunched, face obscured. He approached the door, slowly pausing inches from the lens. He did not knock. He did not speak. He simply stood there, swaying slightly, watching. Then he walked away. I froze. Breath locked in my chest. My fingers trembled as I sent the clip to Nina. She responded immediately. "I am calling the sheriff. Stay in your room. Do not open the door." Within minutes, 2 patrol cars rolled down the street. Their lights were off, but I could see them from my window. Officers searched the area. The man was gone. The deputy called me. We checked nearby businesses with cameras. He left toward the highway. "We will increase patrols." I barely slept after that. Each creak in the apartment sounded like footsteps. Each gust of wind felt like a presence outside the window. 2 nights later, everything escalated. I had just finished a late shift at the nursing home and was taking temperature readings on a patient when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I ignored it. It buzzed again. then again. When I finally stepped into the hallway, I listened to the voicemail. His voice was unmistakable, thick, slurred, dripping with alcohol. "I know where you work. Come outside. Now." The words scraped along my spine. I grabbed a coworker, then told my supervisor everything. She locked the front doors and called security. 2 guards rushed to the entrance, one posting inside the door, the other outside in the freezing air. I hid in the break room, heart pounding so hard it felt like my ribs would crack again. Another voicemail came. "You think you can call the cops on your own father and walk away? You think I will let you ruin me? You are coming with me." Then the message cut off with a crash. A minute later, the nursing home erupted with noise, security shouting, a door slamming. I ran to the hallway. Through the glass doors, I saw him, my father, stumbling, drunk, furious. His coat hung open, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes wild. He pounded on the glass. "Open this damn door, now!" One of the guards held him back with a firm arm. "Sir, you cannot be here. This is a restricted facility." My father shoved him. Hard. The guard stumbled. Another stepped in. A staff member called the sheriff. I pressed myself against the wall, trembling so violently my knees almost buckled. The guard outside managed to restrain my father long enough for deputies to arrive. Their cruisers lit the night with a flashing red glow that reflected off the snow. When they approached him, he staggered, shouting nonsense, swearing at everyone, blaming me, blaming the world, blaming anyone except himself. Nina arrived moments later, breath clouding in the icy air. She walked straight to me first, checking my face, my ribs, my breathing. Then she turned to the deputies. "Is he intoxicated?" One nodded. "Very. He violated the restraining order by coming here." Nina's voice hardened. "And by contacting her, and by threatening her, and by being on healthcare property." The deputies moved in. "Richard Cole, you are under arrest for violating a court order, trespassing in a healthcare facility, disorderly conduct, and harassment." My father tried to protest, but his words were slurred beyond recognition. His legs buckled. He fell to his knees in the snow. One deputy steadied him. Another cuffed his wrists. They lifted him into the cruiser. He did not look at me this time. Not once. As the car pulled away, red lights spinning through the frost, I realized something profound. He no longer terrified me. He disgusted me. And the system was finally holding him accountable. Nina walked me back inside, her voice softening as the adrenaline drained from my body. "This is the turning point, Savannah. It gets better from here." I exhaled and leaned against the wall, ribs aching, heart pounding, but something inside me loosening for the first time in years. His last attempt to control me had ended not with fear, but with handcuffs. The week after his arrest felt unreal at first, like the air around me had changed texture. The world had been sharp for so long that the sudden lack of danger felt disorienting, almost suspicious, as if fear might be hiding behind a corner waiting to reattach itself to my spine. But it did not. Not immediately, and for the first time in my adult life, I noticed something I had not felt in years. Space. The kind of mental space where thoughts could stretch without colliding with fear. I moved into my new apartment on a Sunday morning, the bakery downstairs filling the hallway with the smell of warm cinnamon and fresh bread. The landlord had left a basket near the door. A small gesture, a welcome to your new beginning card leaned against a loaf of sourdough. I ran my fingers along the wall. The paint was a soft cream color, marked by faint scuffs from previous tenants, but to me, it looked like freedom. I unpacked slowly, folding clothes with careful movements so my ribs would not protest. Every time I opened a new box, the room felt a little more like mine. I set the small table near the window where light pooled on the floor in the afternoons. I placed a single plant on the sill. I hung my stethoscope on a hook beside the kitchen counter. These were tiny things, but each one whispered, "You are not in danger anymore." That night, I slept without waking. No footsteps, no shouting, no doors slammed hard enough to rattle the hinges. Just quiet. Real quiet. The next morning, I went to my first therapy session. The counselor, Dr. Everett, had soft lines around her eyes that made her look like she had smiled more than she had frowned in her lifetime. She invited me to sit, offered water, and waited until I exhaled before speaking. "Tell me what brought you here." My voice shook at first, then steadied, then cracked, then steadied again. I talked for nearly the whole hour. She listened without flinching at anything. When I finished, she said gently, "You have been surviving for a long time. Now we will help you learn to live." That sentence stayed with me like a quiet song. I repeated it on the bus ride home. I repeated it while brushing my teeth. I repeated it when fear tried to creep in uninvited. At work, my co-workers hugged me softly, mindful of my ribs. One nurse brought me soup. Another slipped a gift card onto my desk. My supervisor adjusted my schedule so my body could heal. Patients noticed, too. One elderly man whispered, "You look tired, sweetheart, but stronger. Keep going." I nodded, swallowing a lump in my throat. On Wednesday evening, I returned to the support group. The women remembered my name. They made room for me in the circle without question. I told them about his arrest, about the night at the nursing home, about the fear that still tangled itself around my ribs, even when he was behind bars. Dawn, the facilitator, nodded slowly. Fear takes longer to leave than pain does. But you are letting light in, and light is stubborn. It finds cracks. After the session, an older woman with silver braids hugged me gently and whispered, "Every day you stay away from him, you rewrite your future." I went home holding those words like they were something fragile and precious. By the end of the month, I enrolled in an RN program. It felt bold. It felt terrifying. It felt like reclaiming the parts of me that had been crushed under years of walking on broken eggshells. I bought a used textbook set and stacked them near my bed. I took notes late into the night, my ribs still sore but healing. One Saturday morning, I passed a furniture shop having a clearance sale. In the front window sat a small round table, pale oak, smooth edges, sunlight resting on it like a blessing. My father had always insisted on a rectangular table, the kind where he sat at the head and I sat where he could see every flicker of my face. I walked into the store. I bought the round table. When the delivery workers carried it up the narrow stairs to my apartment, I felt tears prick my eyes. I wiped them quickly. After they left, I stepped back and looked at it. A table with no head, no throne, no power imbalance, just a circle. Equal, soft, safe. I made tea and sat at the table alone, watching snow drift past the window. The warmth of the mug seeped into my palms. The quiet settled around me in a way that no longer felt threatening. Healing did not feel like a sudden rush of relief. It felt like dozens of small moments stacking slowly on top of one another until they shaped something whole. A neighbor's hello in the hallway. The first morning without pain when breathing. A new recipe I tried just because I could. A night without checking the locks twice. For the first time in my life, I was not surviving someone. I was becoming someone. And the rising quiet inside me did not feel like fear anymore. It felt like life. 1 year later, the morning sunlight spilled across my apartment like it had been waiting for this exact day to arrive. The bakery downstairs had just opened, and the scent of fresh bread drifted through my vent as I set the table. My round table, my quiet victory. I placed 2 mugs on it, then 3 more, then a basket of toast, and a pot of oatmeal steaming gently. It mirrored the breakfast I had made the morning my father was arrested, but this version felt like rewriting a chapter in a book I once believed would end in tragedy. Today there was no fear cooking in my kitchen, only warmth. A knock sounded at the door. When I opened it, Nina stood there with a grin bright enough to melt the snow on her coat. Behind her was Harriet, leaning slightly on her cane cheeks, rosy from the cold. 2 co-workers from the nursing home followed, both holding grocery bags. The apartment, usually so quiet, suddenly filled with the soft hum of people who cared. As they stepped inside, Nina paused at the doorway, eyes scanning my face the way she always did out of habit rather than concern. "You look good," she said, nudging my arm. "Better than last year." I laughed under my breath. "Anything is better than last year." Harriet reached for my hand, squeezing gently. "You made it, sweetheart. Really made it." We sat around the table, knees brushing elbows, knocking mugs clinking on wooden edges. I looked at the steam rising from the oatmeal and felt an ache bloom in my chest, not from bruises this time, but from recognition. The last time I cooked breakfast like this, I was shaking, terrified, waiting for deputies to arrive before the man who claimed to love me woke up and tried to break me again. I cleared my throat. The room quieted. Last year I made this same meal for fear. Today I make it for freedom. For a moment, no one moved. Then Nina lifted her mug. To freedom, she said. To healing, Harriet added. To the bravest woman I know, my coworker whispered. I swallowed hard. For months, I had trained myself to stay composed whenever someone praised me. But today, I let the feeling rise. I let myself feel it. After breakfast, I walked to the window. Snow fell in soft spirals, drifting like feathers. A world away from the night I thought I would not survive. My father had been sentenced 3 months earlier after violating the restraining order repeatedly. 2 to 4 years, the judge had declared. Time for him to sit with the consequences he'd always outrun. Time for me to breathe without checking over my shoulder. Time for something new to grow. I watched the snow settle on the street below, blanketing everything in quiet. The kind of quiet that once scared me. The kind that now felt like a gift. I thought about the girl I was a year ago, standing in the kitchen with a split lip and bruised ribs, whispering to herself in the dark. Tomorrow morning, he will meet someone he cannot intimidate. I did not know then that the someone would be me. I did not know then that courage arrives slowly like dawn light creeping across a windowsill. I did not know then that justice can unfold in layers, not all at once, but steadily, like breath returning after being held too long. Nina joined me at the window. You ready for what comes next? I nodded. I was. I had furniture that was mine, a job I loved, classes that challenged me, a table that symbolized equality instead of dominance, friends who filled my home with warmth. A life built not in the shadow of survival, but in the open air of choice. I ran my fingers along the edge of the table, feeling the smooth grain beneath my skin. I thought about how far I had come. The girl who hid bruises in the dark had become a woman who stood in the light without apology. The dawn that once terrified me was now something I welcomed. I turned back to the table, watching my friends laugh, Harriet tapping her spoon on her mug to make a point. Nina rolling her eyes, everyone relaxed and safe. A year ago, I had been broken. Today, I was whole. A year ago, silence protected me. Today, silence belonged to me. My voice was stronger than fear. My truth was louder than his violence. My life was mine again. As the light warmed the room, I whispered the words that had carried me through 12 months of rebuilding. Silence did not protect me that night, but it brought justice in the morning. When I set my mug down, I knew with absolute clarity that this morning belonged to me, and I would never give it away again. If you have ever lived through something you could not explain, something you had to survive quietly because speaking felt dangerous, then you already understand the weight of this story. You understand what it means to wake up in a house where every footstep might spark an explosion. You understand what it means to choose silence, not because you are weak, but because in that moment, silence is the only shield you have. And if you have ever found the strength to finally speak after years of hiding the bruises on your skin or the bruises no one could see, then you know the tremble in your voice that comes the first time you tell the truth. Maybe you carried it alone for too long. Maybe no one believed you when you tried. Maybe people told you to stay quiet to keep the peace. But peace built on fear is not peace at all. It is a prison with soft walls. It took me years to understand that. It took one morning to change everything. If you are watching this and you have ever been silenced by someone who claimed to love you, if you have ever been told to calm down, to keep it inside, to not embarrass the family, I want you to hear me now. You deserve safety. You deserve protection. You deserve a morning where the light hits your face and you do not flinch. You deserve a life where your breath belongs to you, not to the person who taught you to fear it. And if you walked away even once, even halfway, even just in your heart, then you are stronger than you think, stronger than anyone ever gave you credit for. So let me ask you this, from my table to yours, from my healed ribs to whatever part of you is still tender. Have you ever been silenced by the people who should have protected you? And when did you finally speak? Tell me your story. Tell me where you are watching from. Tell me what time it is as you hear these words. Tell me the moment you realized you deserved better. I am listening, and someone else reading the comments might need your courage to find their own voice.